Well, I'll do my best. Can you turn those chairs around and sit down? I mean, I didn't say it was going to be short. And we're going to take a bunch of pictures too in a little bit. I was very happy and have found it was a wonderful thing to be the oldest on both sides of my family. I was the oldest on the Dunn side, my mother was a Dunn, and on the Greaves side. And Granddaddy, both my granddaddy, I never thought I'd be 79 years old because Granddaddy Greaves died at 44. He had just came out, from what I understand, he had gone to the doctor that day. He hadn't been feeling well. The doctor looked him over and said, "You're just fine. Go on home." And he went out to his car and died. And that was 10 days before Marcia was born. And Connie was born 2 years after I was. And Sandra was born, I believe, three years after. And so I was 5, and of course Granddaddy and Grandmother lived in Spur at that time, and he had a water softener company and a sort of a hardware store. And I actually remember playing in the hardware store some, and I remember one year, out of 5 years, he gave me $5, which back then was a lot of money to give a kid. I mean, because some people were making, what, $10 a week. In fact, it was funny, before Carol and I got married, I sang professionally with a group called Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians. We did a national tour, and one guy who was with Waring after I was, Carol and I went to a reunion of the Pennsylvanians last year, and he said he was a music teacher in a college. And he used to tell people Fred Waring the Pennsylvanians was what the Beatles were later on. And then when he taught longer and longer, people didn't really understand what the Beatles particularly were. And he got this, his latest thing, he says Fred Waring the Pennsylvanians are what Taylor Swift is now. And he really was a big deal at that time. In fact, I dropped out of Baylor whenever I was after my junior year, and I had gone to Pennsylvania to a Fred Waring workshop, and that's where I met Carol. And while I was there, I auditioned, and I was hired to go with Waring. Well, with Waring, they furnished a jacket. They took us. We went nationwide tour, and I made $160 a week. Today that sounds like nothing. But the other day, Lauren asked Alexa or somebody, what would $160 be in today's money? $1,551. I was pretty well paid.
Yeah.
160 back then was a big deal. So anyway.
They had at that age. I'm pretty sure they had to sign for them back then.
Yes.
I know Granddaddy had to sign for Jeanette to marry Bunk,
Yes.
because she was 14.
14. Yeah.
Grandmother was 14 also,
Wow,
when she was married.
isn't that crazy?
But you know
And
why?
she was 17 when Daddy was born. So we would go out,
Daddy
and
was 16.
people would wonder if Grandmother and Daddy were married and I was their kid, or if Daddy and I were brothers. But we were 3 generations, but they thought it was 2.
One thing I was so disappointed in Granddaddy Greaves, he told my mother, women do not go to college. You will not go to
really?
college. Yeah. He said, you will get married and have kids. That's all that you do.
And they did a whole bunch.
Yeah. But I wish she had been able to go to college. Because I think she could have really, but she did well anyway.
And my mother was every bit as bright and smart
Yes.
as your mother was. I know your mother was extremely intelligent. Mother was extremely intelligent. She just never went that extra
Yeah.
schooling to get a college degree. I mean, she skipped 2 grades to graduate
Yeah.
high school at 15.
Yeah.
And anyway,
Well, Granddaddy wasn't gonna help with he wasn't gonna allow her to go. She was just flat not allowed to go. Women don't do that. So,
Well,
anyway, she was
smart anyway.
She was always helping Daddy with farming,
Yeah.
of course, and I can remember when I was little waking up and nobody being in the house and looking out the window, and Mother was out hoeing close to the house, you know, and with Connie usually. It was good if Connie was with her, but if Connie was in the house with me, that meant I was fixing to get tormented in some way or another.
of course not. Let me set this up. Of course, Daddy was the oldest, like I'm the oldest. But Don, his little brother, was only 7 years older than I was. So we were best friends, and I wore his hand-me-downs whenever I was done. So,
Of course, Dad being a baby, and I was just his grandmother, you know, for a lot of those years. And I can tell you this, my dad looked up to your dad. That was his hero. But my dad wanted a little bit more out of life for once. You know, he didn't want to be a farmer. My dad was the smartest person I ever met. Super IQ. Joined the Navy, became the 2nd highest enlisted man for the United States.
Oh my gosh, that's
There was only one
amazing.
higher than my dad.
Oh my goodness.
So, served 20 years. Chokes out. He was my hero.
Proud of him.
But the only time I ever saw him cry outside of your dad's funeral was the day he retired.
yeah.
That's how much he meant to me. But I'll tell you this, my dad would drop anything he was doing. If I said, hey, I need you, he was there.
Yeah.
And I know he was a smoker. He had his faults, but he was an amazing man. And
I
I
used
wish.
to get the ride home from school with him. He was in the high school, I was in the elementary school across, and I would get to ride home with him every day after school. And I just thought I was just because he was good looking. And I just
I
thought,
said he looked like
Like
that.
Elvis Presley, like, yeah.
best thing, you know,
He
I'm
still
sitting in
reminds me
that
of that.
chair and I'd sit up on my feet so I could be big and make all those girls jealous. You
So
know?
I'm talking about when the new cars would come out. Well,
Yeah.
we came back to Texas for one main reason. He went back with a new car, usually a Chrysler New Yorker. So we lived in Virginia, which is Washington Redskin back then country. We were Dallas Cowboy fans. We had a Texas license plate because it was cheaper if we registered it in Texas than in Virginia. So we got a lot of slack for that.
It's okay, it didn't stop.
When we came back to Texas after he retired, he would not go back to West Texas. Too much sand. So we stopped. He said Dallas area was as far as we would go. So we stopped there. He had a 20-year career at Northern Telecom, retired. And we got to travel with him the last few years. And unfortunately, and I'm sorry about how you remember your mom. My dad died at 65 of a heart attack. But I only remember him one way. How he always
And that's good.
Yeah.
That is the
Don't
best
have-
thing in the
I
world.
don't have.
Yes.
So, yeah, I miss him.
Hadn't he just picked up the grandkids and he got home and was getting them a snack and he just sat down in a chair?
TV,
And that was it.
But he always said if he had to go, he wanted
That's the
to go
way to
in
go.
his house.
In his house.
Yeah.
And another thing he talked about, and you guys are gonna hate this, he hated to come back because he said, old people, all they want to do is talk about what's wrong with him or what pill they were taking. He would not go to a doctor, he would not take, he lived off bare aspirin and Alka-Seltzer.
Well, I can tell you a couple more things about Donnie. Since we were buddies, and it's always been funny to me that my uncle was almost my age. But when he first went to the service, he had I don't remember what it was because I'm not good about cars, but I remember it was a blue two-tone convertible that he let me have when he first went to the service. And so I got to drive that car around, and he, whenever he first came back one time, I was still in high school, and I was a grader for our history teacher at Louisa High School. I was a grader almost every year in school, and we were riding around the square, I guess, and he asked me about this girl that he'd met named Diane Couch.
Oh.
And I said, well, she's not very good in history because I grade her papers. But I said she's not. I never dated her. I think she's. I can't remember if she was a year younger or a year older than me, but that's his mother.
They were a little bit different. One's IQ was up here on mom's, not quite on that level.
I wasn't going to say that. Okay.
She'll tell you that. She'll tell you.